This podcast episode contains discussions of homophobia and sexual assault. If you or someone you know has been affected by these issues, please know that you are not alone. Help is available. You can reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or a mental health professional. If you are experiencing a crisis, please call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE, H-O-P-E, or visit RAIN's website at rain.org, RAINN.org.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Once More with Feelings. I'm Beth.
And I'm Michelle. We're so excited to spend time with you because, let's be honest, we have way too many feelings to keep to ourselves.
In this podcast, we'll dive into the media that moves us. Everything from movies and music to books and more. If it makes us laugh, cry, or question our life choices, we're talking about it.
That's right. Each week we'll share genuine conversations about the media that shapes our lives. And sometimes we may even stay on topic.
Whether it's the latest hits or timeless classics, we're here to talk about what truly resonates with us, and maybe throw in a few bad jokes along the way.
So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's get started. Hi guys! This week we're looking at the classic To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. This movie was released in 1995, and it was directed by Biban Kidron. Am I saying that right?
Sure, but you can call her Baroness Kidron.
Oh.
She is actually a member of the House of Lords.
I did not know that.
And she also, oddly enough, directed Bridget Jones.
Okay, cool.
The Edge of Reason. Not the first Bridget
Not
Jones.
The first. I don't think I've seen The Edge of Reason.
It's another Colin film in which a director has done a sequel.
Yes. Yeah, I've only ever seen the first Bridget Jones. No, I think I saw the second. I think the second one is when they have the fight in the fountain.
That is correct.
I've never seen the third one, I think. And that was, yeah. But yeah, we rewatched To Wong Foo. Rewatched. This movie stars Patrick Swayze. You may know him from Dirty Dancing and Roadhouse and Ghost. Wesley Snipes, Blade, White Men Can't Jump, and New Jack City. And my personal favorite.
Also, I know him from Demolition Man. Very important film. Very avant-garde.
Ooh. But have you noticed a pattern with these first two, though? They're, even Dirty Dancing and Ghost, they're still...
Very manly.
Very manly men. And then we have John Leguizamo, who I personally adore. He was in Spawn, he was in Moulin Rouge, and he was, we don't talk about him, Bruno, in Encanto. And with John...
He played a lot of cops in a lot of series. So
he was, want to say Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet, but for some reason I also want to say Benvolio. For some reason those two names are screwed up in my head. You all at home can correct me, and it's embarrassing because I am a Shakespeare nerd, but I cannot get this straight in my head right now. John is more of a character actor. He is able to invest himself in his roles. And I feel like you see that in To Wong Foo.
I think John does what Wesley Snipes aspires to. Because Wesley Snipes, when people say they're character actors and that they're going to fully invest themselves in their characters and they're always going to be that character when they're on set, typically that means they are insufferable in most ways. And honestly, it did not take that kind of effort to get that kind of emotion out. So when someone says they're a character actor, you have to really look at the actor themselves and see whether or not that's just pretentiousness or it actually is a method by which they are acting. In John's case, I believe it's true.
Definitely.
That he invests himself in a character, but he doesn't lose himself in it. He just invests himself in it. Whereas Wesley Snipes, not talking bad about Wesley.
No.
Because I think he has his place in Hollywood. He has his place as an actor. But his pretentiousness is forgetting that everybody working around him is just as important as him.
That's true. And unfortunately, my background knowledge of Wesley Snipes and seeing him in movies, I feel like he plays the same character. I mean, I'm saying that with a squinty kind of, I don't know his whole entire filmography, so I can't say for sure that he plays. I mean, honestly, in Tu Wong Fu, Noxema is kind of Wesley Snipes in a dress.
Yeah, I can say even though his characters may be against type at times, Wesley the actor is not playing against type. He's still playing himself.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people who play themselves in every role they do,
Mm-hmm.
but they make it work for them. And Wesley can make some of them work.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in Demolition Man, he makes that work for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think if a character is arrogant, he can make that work.
Yeah.
In this case, as Noxema, I'm not saying he's not making it work, but he doesn't make it seem as if he's ever been on a stage before.
Yeah. I think out of the three queens, Vita and Chi-Chi and Noxema, I think that Wesley Snipes' Noxema is the least believable of the three drag queens.
I agree. Now, we should preface this by saying, and this is the saddest IMDb description of a movie. 3 drag queens travel cross country until their car breaks down, leaving them stranded in a small town. That was it.
Wow.
That's as far as it went. This movie,
There's a lot more to this
which,
movie.
if you break it down to its thematic pieces, isn't overreaching and it is not grand.
Oh, no.
But there's so many small parts to this movie, so many themes that travel within this movie that if you're not paying attention, you will completely miss it because you're looking at the drag queens.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So to say that this is about 3 drag queens traveling cross country is to make it seem like it's a road film when literally there's only been 2 roads in the bloody film. And one of them, you're getting glass thrown at you. So I don't think we can say this is a cross-country road trip film because
They don't
you're
go
not
very far.
following them on a cross-country road trip.
No.
You're following them to a small town, which is where we find ourselves through almost the entire movie.
Yes.
So I agree that Wesley Snipes does not look like he's been on a stage, and he is the one who is, I guess, the focal point of not being polished.
And if you plan on watching the movie or you need a reminder, it starts out with a pageant, and that Wesley Snipes' character and Patrick Swayze's character win. They combine, they have a combination of 2 winners, blah, blah, blah. And Chi-Chi loses and is highly, highly upset about that. And they, well, basically it's Vita, which is Patrick Swayze's character. She kind of not manhandles. That wasn't a good word.
Well, I mean, we can say manhandle because there's this blurring that I don't like. Okay, as a trans woman, I am not appreciative of the blurring between gay men playing drag queens or even straight men playing drag queens and them being used as the analog for women throughout the film.
Yeah.
And they're constantly dressed up. Now, I've seen drag queens. They play a performance on a stage.
Yes.
And then they take their makeup off and they go home and they are gay men or straight men or whatever in their normal everyday lives.
Yep. And there are trans drag queens, and they do not stay in drag all the time.
No, they get dressed as who they are, not as their performance. It would be like if Bozo the Clown just wore his Bozo costume all the time and you never saw the actor again.
And what we need to remind ourselves is that as somebody, me, who is obsessed with drag queens, I love drag queens. I have been watching RuPaul since I can remember. And I can tell you, they're not trying to dress like women. They are trying to dress it's a stylized, kind of avant-garde, outrageous version of femininity, but it is not meant to be dressed like a woman. So in the movie, when they're just out and about, even driving or hanging out in the town, and they're dressed even as, I would say, their version of casual, it's still, that's not drag.
It is almost like it's a straight man's idea of what drag queens do.
Exactly.
Which is disappointing because RuPaul was in this film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming consulted it. You might know better.
I do not know if Ru was consulted or just brought in. This is 95. Ru wasn't the big powerhouse that Ru is now.
No, but I think she was still one of the leading drag queens at
Definitely
the time.
one of the more known, I wouldn't say leading, but definitely one of the more known in popular culture.
That's what I mean by leading.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't know anything outside of popular culture
No.
because I do not, as a trans woman, and I'm going to say this a lot during this film, so I'm very sorry, but it has always irked me. And for a very long time, I had trouble reconciling with drag queens.
Mm-hmm.
I find it less so now, but I found it yuck.
Mm-hmm.
It was a tactile feeling that made me feel uncomfortable because men were playing women.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that's how a lot of cis people see trans women. And that made me very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned since then to get past a lot of that. But this movie drags that back into you because what it doesn't address are the people underneath the costumes.
Oh, yeah.
It stays on the surface.
Yeah.
And they only ever refer to each other. I mean,
By their drag names. I mean,
by their drag names.
You only know Vita's name being Eugene because of when they get pulled over, and she says that Eugene is on her license.
Right.
So that's really the only time you get any of their actual humanity. Well, and Vita is literally the only character that you get more of an insight into. Because Chi-Chi, you just know that Chi-Chi wants to be a drag queen. Really, that is literally all you know. And Noxzema just wants to go to California and win the other pageant that they're heading to.
Right.
But Vita is the only one that you get because they go to the house that Vita grew up in on their way through. And you see a woman come out and you can only assume that's mom. And when mom realizes who it is, gives a disappointing look, goes back inside. Vita rips up the map. Again, you should have learned something from Blair Witch. We do not kick the map in the river. God.
And I think that was a device for that to happen. It was very clunky.
It was very clunky.
But they had to have something so they could get lost.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a map, how are you getting lost?
Exactly.
But then again, it's not really a travel film because they just cut to the scene where they're at Lost.
Yeah.
So they cut to the scene at Lost, then they cut to the scene at town.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no travel.
No.
The travel is done in just little vignettes.
And it's only in the very beginning of the movie. The rest of the movie is no travel.
Right, exactly. It's almost exclusively held
in that town. And the town is called Snydersville, but it was actually filmed in Loma, Nebraska. So it's actually a little town that time forgot since the Depression era, because unless that was all staged, that was the most grayish, bleak town. Short of, I don't know.
It reminds me so very specifically of two instances in film. One would be Tremors, which has a more of Arizona feel.
Yes.
Or New Mexico.
At least the
purposely.
The dusty roads make sense there.
Right. And Big Fish from 2003.
Okay. Now, that I don't see because...
That's an idyllic, but I'm talking about that single road through town.
Yes.
And it's just the buildings on either side. You never actually see real homes.
That's true.
So much as you just see buildings. And the overview gives that same feel for both.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a different level of desolation and probably more depressive notes in this one and in Tremors.
Yeah, that I can see. We'll have to add Tremors to our list.
Apparently, because I've mentioned it like 3 times now.
It's a good movie.
It is. And I love the movie. I love the characters in it. And we'll have so much fun dissecting that.
Oh, gosh, yes.
But first, we got to deal with the drag queens on the stairs. So Chi-Chi is on the stairs crying after the unveiling of who won, which is a tie.
Yes.
Between Noxzema.
Our two leads.
Between the two leads of the three leads. Noxzema and Vita.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going up the stairs. I guess you said
They're going to the after party.
Right. They're going to the after party and they're dressed up again.
In drag.
But
as women. They're not dressed in drag.
Right. They're dressed as drag, but not for a performance. Mm-hmm. Which again throws that whole thing into their little breakdown in the car later on of what a drag queen is versus a transvestite versus a transsexual, which
1995, they didn't have the term transgender. It wasn't as widely used. Transsexual was the considered appropriate until we started drilling into people's heads that it has nothing to do with sex, it has to do with gender. So,
and there are some trans people who still use transsexual as their nomenclature for their identity.
Yes.
And that's fine. But they know what it means. Mm-hmm. Just as transgender people know what they mean when they say it. So I'm not trying to invalidate anyone's idea of what term to use. One, to me, is outdated. Transvestite is kind of yucking someone's yum. Mm-hmm. Just let them be men who like to wear feminine articles.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
They break that down, I think, because in 1995 especially, they had to explain what the hell was going on.
Yes.
But then they ignore the conventions of what they just said.
I know.
Throughout the film.
I know.
Because we have people going to the after show who are drag queens who are dressed as women. Mm-hmm. And they never undress from being a woman.
No, the only time you see Patrick Swayze as a man is in the very beginning and when his wig gets pulled off.
And he freaks out. Mm-hmm. That stuns him to have that pulled off, which leads me to believe that perhaps that character was supposed to be still finding themselves and maybe more trans.
Yeah. Well, when you look up issues about this movie, transphobia is one of the things that is mentioned, even though they only mention transsexual in that one little scene, and nobody comes out and says, this is how I dress because this is how I feel. No one has that, no inner conversation about transgender with anybody. But it is mentioned as an issue, one of the issues that is brought up. Because there are a lot of issues that are addressed. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're not addressed to the sense of any type of conclusion. There is blatant racism, the use of the N-word, the use of Hispanic slang, hate words.
Oh, the casual racism is rampant.
Yes. The sexism. I mean, between the cop in the beginning and Stalker
Sheriff Dullard.
Dollard. It's a typo.
It's a typo.
Stalker Channing's husband, Virgil, he's an abusive, sexist piece of shit, really.
Mechanic.
He's a mechanic, so,
And Nothing about mechanics. We're just saying
he's
he
a mechanic.
is a mechanic in the film who is also abusive and sexist.
He's fulfilling his own stereotype. And then there's, the homophobia, which obviously, because Dollard has a weird moment in a bar where he starts to explain how gross it is for two men to be together, but his tone of voice is changing to where he's actually thinking I don't know if he's actually thinking it might be a good thing, but the way he was reacting, his tone of voice was changing.
He's writing fanfic.
Basically.
In his head about men being together.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to convince himself that that's somehow wrong and somehow he doesn't like it, yet he's the one devising the scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Smelling the cologne. The sounds of grunting between two men.
It got interesting. I don't think I've read fan fiction that dirty, and I read some pretty dirty shit.
He kind of went all in there.
He did.
At first, I was like, maybe when I first saw the film, I was very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll say, I was at home. I watched this on HBO, I believe. We're old. Most things we're going to remember seeing is going to be on
Watched
HBO.
on HBO or Skinamax late at night.
And I saw it on HBO, and I wasn't confused about who I was. I just didn't know. I didn't have the verbiage. I did not have the words to say. And this film made me extremely uncomfortable to the point of crying. And it's not on this film to make me comfortable. I'm actually kind of glad that it made me uncomfortable because it gave me, in a small town that I came from, I had no other representation. This was the only representation by 3 straight men. I don't know if John's straight or not.
I don't
because
know.
he has included drag in his comedy routines in the past, which is why he was cast for this film.
I honestly don't know, but much like many cases where they could have had somebody play the role that could have played the role because it was their life, 3 straight men. And
Can you think of any 3
who could have
men who have done drag who could have played these parts and had the draw?
They could have, no, they would, I mean, Rue. They could have had other drag queens, but again, it wouldn't have had the draw as having these actors. And that was why. It was having those names. But did you know that Patrick Swayze got the role? Well, first, Gary Oldman was up for it, but he decided he didn't want to do it because he had just finished Dracula.
He would have been fantastic in it. Gary Oldman would have slayed as a queen.
He didn't want to do it because he just finished Dracula and he didn't want to be in another heavy makeup movie.
That's a very practical way of looking at it. I appreciate him more for that distinction.
I read that Viggo Mortensen also was up for it, but I don't know why he didn't.
I don't know what to say to that. Viggo, I don't even know.
I know
what that would look like.
But the reason that Patrick Swayze got it was because he did a 30-minute monologue that was inspired by the bullying that he suffered when he was a boy studying ballet.
I'll say this. Patrick Swayze does not look like he spent any time as a drag queen on stage in this movie.
No.
However,
as a woman,
yes, exactly.
He was the most believable as a woman, I feel.
He was the one I went, that's a trans woman.
From the sway in the hips to, just the mannerisms.
He embraced his femininity without resorting to trope.
Exactly.
In his performance. Now, there's a lot of trope throughout this film. You're not going to get away from that because drag queens rely on trope.
But that's in their performance.
Right.
Like when they have to redo the bedroom. First thing.
The magic
was weird because it was out of nowhere, but they were playing the Wonder Woman theme, which was pretty
Which is fantastic that they were playing the Wonder Woman theme.
From the original Wonder Woman TV show. And even there, I never really paid attention to the lyrics because I was a kid with something about something on your silky tights to save the world. And I'm going,
your satin
sexism.
Tights. Yeah.
Sexism. Okay, whatever. But I want to go back to the racism, homophobia really quick because the one thing that bothered me the first time I saw this movie and bothers me still is the roaming group of rapists.
What the fuck happened? I know I dropped the F-bomb in this thing.
It's your turn.
What the fuck happened here?
Those boys were going to rape Chi-Chi. If Bobby Ray hadn't shown up in his big green pickup truck.
Who is adorable.
He's
adorable in this film. But when I first saw this, I didn't understand that. I thought they might want to beat him up. What I didn't understand was from the viewpoint of a man, this is bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if I were to wear the mask that I wore back then, I would be looking at the scene saying, these men are about to bully this guy for being in that dress.
I think that's kind of how I saw it too.
But looking at it now with eyes that are unmasked, in which I as a woman, I as a person who isn't steeped in the privilege of being a man, see it for the threat it was, and I was actually on that couch with you watching this movie, afraid for her.
I honestly had forgotten that scene until it was happening again, and I was like, this is not what I remembered. Because like you said, it was the bullying, because when I saw this, let's see, 95, yeah, I was in my 20s, and I just early 20s. I was 21. So I saw it as, well, I obviously, as the watcher, know that this is a man in a dress. So obviously those characters must know that this is a man in a dress, and they're going to push her around and blah, 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 blah. But this time, looking back as an adult who is a bit more worldly and has a much darker knowledge of the world, when they were going to rape her. If they could have gotten her, they were going to rape her. And they had her surrounded.
And that's not the worst part of it. The worst part of this is that later on in the movie, they change.
Yeah, and everyone's forgiving. Whoa,
I don't think the one time Noxzema confronts someone and
grabs them by their nuts
and physically assaults them and says, "You're going to apologize,"
is enough.
Would result in any of that. This is wishful thinking. This is wishy thinking. I don't like it because it suggests that while people can change, to suggest that the men who were going to group rape this woman, for them it was a woman because he was not playing a man, he was playing a woman in this role.
Yep.
For them to do that and then to be redeemed later on as good guys.
Oh, yeah.
Is upsetting. And it only speaks to that sexism that runs throughout the film. That there's this patriarchal streak that says that men can take and never have to pay for it. Virgil drives away.
I know.
He never pays.
He beats the crap out of his wife and nobody does a thing about it.
First of all, if you're going to punch Stockard Channing,
you're going to die.
Someone's going to have to pay for it.
Because Stockard Channing is a national treasure.
And how they got her to look
dowdy.
So dowdy.
Oh my God. She is so beautiful.
In a film in which I don't think I've ever seen her even appear dowdy ever in anything. She's stunning in anything she does. Is amazing that they got her to be dowdy.
So the defense of the town, though, if let's assume they don't know what these boys are like, they just think they're roaming bunch of hooligans. Yeah, hoodlums. And Chi-Chi doesn't say anything. Let's just assume Chi-Chi doesn't say anything to anybody. Just Bobby Ray's the only one who knows what was going on, and even then doesn't know exactly what was going on. Then I could sort of see how everybody is forgiven and that they move on. But what's the likelihood of Chi-Chi not telling? Unless, what does that say about Chi-Chi? How many times has something like that almost happened to her in her past that she blows it off and doesn't say something? Because I'm sorry, Patrick Swayze would have gone out and beat the crap out of those boys if they knew what had happened.
I don't know that Chi-Chi's life was good enough for her to believe. And I'm saying her because
they're dressed as women.
They're consistently dressed as drag
and
queens.
And refer to each other as she. So
not in performance. So
yes.
I'm saying she for that reason. I don't think she feels she's worth it.
I don't think she does either.
I think the reason she falls in love so much, and to her own testament, she falls in love so much, is because she honestly focuses on other people rather than being in love with herself.
True, probably. Though there has to be some self-love because maybe not.
I think the amount of self-love she shows is the performance.
Because if you hear a lot of drag queens, and I'm not saying all of them, but there are a lot of them, they do have very sad childhoods, parents who didn't accept them. And then there are the few who come from beautiful, charmed lives with extreme support and bless them.
You just described Celebrity Chef.
Yeah, because what was it when we used to watch Chopped, and it was like everybody came from some type of, either they had a dead family member who they were cooking for, or
addicted to drugs.
Yeah, there was a lot.
It's always something, and that's not bad.
No.
But it does make you sad for everyone who seeks to be in that spotlight because whatever it is, whatever demon they have, and I'm saying demon in a very figurative way, that kind of thing haunts you whether you're in the spotlight or not, but it's much bigger in the spotlight.
True.
So if you have a drug addiction and you become a celebrity chef or a celebrity anything, that becomes a real burden for you.
True.
And you have to fight even harder. For Chi-Chi, self-love evolves throughout this film. And I think if you take away all of the, I think, purposeful bad Latina reenactments that John does throughout it, where he's really playing that up. And I'm sure that is the character.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is John Leguizamo.
Yeah. I think that once you peel all that away, you have a person who is scared. And there's no recourse but to portray yourself as not scared. And scared, I'm talking about scared of interacting with people, scared of falling in love. You know, scared of showing who you are no matter what. And I think that type of person that he plays evolves through this film in this very small time frame.
Yes.
But he evolves, and when he does let go of Bobby Ray, I think that's him accepting that he doesn't have to win these little trials every time.
Yes.
That he can focus on him or herself. Because, again, it's very hard to pull apart these characters. They don't ever undress. They're always dressed in drag.
That's true.
It bothers me to the point of distraction that the separation isn't there. But I understand the reasons why they had to do it this way, because this film's, it's utterly about sexism.
Yes.
And you can't have this without your bosom buddies.
Yeah.
Who are always dressed in drag.
Yes. And I think also, like, it's the plot point, really. It's the, you know, if we're not in drag when the car breaks down, then the people in the town aren't going to know. They're going to think we're men, and then we dress up. They're going to think, "Oh, what's going on here?"
But we're trying to drag queens.
Yeah, but we're trying to pretend that we're women, so we have to carry that through from pageant all the way to the end. So
also the sheriff assaults
Patrick Swayze's
Vita,
character.
Yeah, Vita, putting his hand under her dress, which
Patrick Swayze put a corncob in his underwear. So the reaction of the police officer, Chris Penn. That was genuine.
Yeah.
So there was that.
And then, you know, Vita says, when a lady says no, she means, get your hand off my dick, buddy.
Exactly.
So when they leave behind a single shoe in Cinderella style, in that Cinderella princess style. It's even a clear shoe.
Yes.
So we have that.
There are a couple, you know, there's that reference, Disney reference, but then there's also later on when the three of them are standing on the balcony watching the Strawberry Social.
Social, yes.
And Vita says it only takes a fairy. And in the three of them standing there are dressed as the three fairies from Sleeping Beauty, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather in the pink, green, and blue.
And I thought the color scheme was spot on. Like, you noticed that.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
because
right
the town
away.
is so gray. And then they start bringing little pops of color in. And then, like, the town by the end is very colorful. And I get that. It's like they brought life back to the town. You know, that the cliche of you know, just they were the spark.
The life.
Yeah.
The fairy godmothers.
Yeah, they were the fairy godmothers. So I remember when I first saw this, again, 95, I was really kind of, you know, I knew about drag queens. I knew what they were-ish, but I didn't, like, I always, like, had that, you know, I appreciate it. I love the beauty of it. I mean, if a drag queen said, hey, can I do your makeup? I would be there in a minute, even though I know it would not be anything I could wear to like work or anything. Oh, my students would love that if I came in wearing drag makeup. They would think it was funny because they wouldn't understand. But, I would totally love to have it done. I didn't know enough about it. So for me, it was just like the pretty dresses and the cute storyline. And I loved this movie because it stuck out as being different. And knowing the person that I am now, that makes sense. I was always stuck in a same world. So for me, anything that stood out as different and interesting and went against the flow, it immediately drew my attention. But I can't say anything deeper about it then. There was nothing else deep other than it was an entertaining movie and it caught my eye. But now I can look at this movie and I can definitely say that it is very problematic. And again, I love Patrick Swayze. I love John Leguizamo. I tolerate Wesley Snipes. My favorite Wesley Snipes scene ever in the history of ever is his little scene at the end of season 1 of What We Do in the Shadows. With the Vampire Council.
That's true.
That is the only time I'm like, oh yeah, because
he's playing Blade.
He's playing Blade, and his computer keeps going out, so he's not really there, but he is there, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, I like
to think that he did that while he was filming with Deadpool.
Oh, I wonder.
And the reason why it's a call-in is because he literally filmed it on, in his trailer or something.
I don't know, because I don't think that would have coincided in the timeline.
I want it to be true. And that's all it has
Okay, so that's your headcanon.
It's my head pistol.
Your head pistol. So, yeah, I can't look back and I can't say that it was anything deep, but I remember being entertained by it. This time, while I was entertained by moments, I didn't find the movie as endearing as I had in the past. Again, I used to love Chi-Chi, but this time I found Chi-Chi to be like...
Vapid?
Just cloying isn't the word I'm looking for. Just sickening. I mean...
A bit much?
No, and it just bothersome. Bothersome.
Oh, okay.
That's it. Just very, very bothersome. She just irked me in ways that, I didn't hate. I don't hate Chi-Chi in any way, shape, or form. But like, I wanted to smack her and be like, will you just stop and listen for a minute?
That's true.
They're not trying to tell you what to do. I mean, they were telling her what to do, but also listen.
I mean, in some ways, Vita, Patrick Swayze's character, is the great white leader.
Yes.
In this film, because racism runs through this.
Oh, definitely.
And they're very out about it. When it happens, it's very blatant.
Mm-hmm.
There is no in between.
Nope. I said they use the N-word.
Which makes sense. And the sexism is there.
Mm-hmm.
The homophobia, the transphobia. There's a lot that happens in this film. Do I think it's disrespectful to the groups who are part of those marginalized groups? Maybe.
I mean...
But I think that it's important that we understand.
I mean, the person who uses the slurs, I said slang before, I meant slurs, he is the cop who tries to assault Vita. So it is basically to that one person who is being extremely racist. In the town where everybody is white. And then there's the one guy who owns the store. I can't remember the character's name, but you got the town has a token black man too. And the one woman likes him a lot. So the town isn't really, they do consider them exotic. Like they do see Chi-Chi as exotic, but they don't have any like overly racist issues with them.
I think here's a problem with that. Now, I understand there's the outright racism of being called slurs, but then there's it's a really, I'm going to say it's microaggressions that even the character who claims to love him goes through. I don't think it's something that was really obvious back then. I think that was supposed to be meant as accepting and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But literally the guy waited 20 years to say anything to her because
Yeah.
he was black and because she's white, and she obviously liked him but didn't say anything either.
Over 20 years of just, pining for each other from afar,
My thing is, there's a lot of unsaid things in this film. Race is just one of them. There are little bits in this film, if you watch it, you will catch those parts that are unsaid. They're inferred through silence.
Oh, yes.
And I think that when we say this is a racist film, it's a homophobic film, I don't think it's gratuitous.
No. It's not. I don't think it was ever intended. I think they were trying to teach lessons, but they were not trying to, they weren't trying to be hateful. They were just trying to portray the different types of people that, I guess, drag queens and people of color, they encounter.
What I guess white cishet people will call alternative lifestyles.
Yes.
But it's just people existing.
Exactly.
So we should get across the point that when they did decide to go on this road trip, it was because when they met Chi-Chi, who was crying, they decided, Vita decided that they were going to take her with them to Hollywood.
And show her how to be a drag queen.
Right, because they won that as a prize. They won 2 tickets as a prize to go to Hollywood and compete. And so they're going to take her with them. In order to do that, they had to use Robin Williams' character. And for the
John
life
Jacob
of me,
Jingleheimer Schmidt.
I cannot remember Robin Williams being in the film, but
In every scene, his hat is at a different angle.
it just kept moving
It kept
around
moving
on
up
his
and
head.
down the brim.
It's like it's on a bowl of some kind.
Like, I honestly thought they were going to go further with the song. John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. Hey, your name is my name too.
Well, Wesley said that.
Yeah.
Noxzema said that. So he finds the ticket, or he gets the tickets from them, and he tells them, go talk to this guy. He's going to give you a car for $50. I'll give you $1,000 for the tickets. That's how they get the money to travel.
Yes.
And the reason they broke down is because instead of picking the Toyota Corolla,
Which would have gotten them there.
which would have been very sturdy, gotten them there, they chose the
I don't know what year it was, but
convertible.
an old convertible Cadillac.
Right. So it was a convertible Cadillac that was rusted out. It wasn't the best one.
Nope.
But for them, it was
all about
chariot.
style.
So they chose that, and they got 2 vignettes away from the city. And that's when it broke down, and the reason why they were in the small town. Do you remember the small town's name?
Snyderville.
Right. So Snyder was there at some point, but you never see him in the film.
I did say it earlier, though, when I said that took place in Loma.
Yeah, I'm just saying. You never see Snyder in the film.
No, Snyder's not in his film.
Okay.
I
I was making a joke about the name of this.
And I was
town, so.
lost in the weeds here. I have an issue with something that they say in this movie, and that's because it's, again, opinions. Everyone has one, but this is mine. I don't think Julie Newmar was the best Catwoman. It will always and forever be Eartha Kitt.
Yes, but this is not To Wong Fu. Thanks for everything, Eartha Kitt.
I know, but they say that she was the best Catwoman.
I agree, and I also disagree with their assertion because I agree with you. It was definitely Eartha Kitt who played the best cat, who happened to also be a woman.
Because that woman was part cat. She just purred.
Right.
But
I'm not saying Julie Newmar did a bad job.
Oh, no.
And that she shouldn't be an icon.
yeah, no, I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying my personal preference.
Right. I agree with you.
Because it's an opinion.
When that
mine.
line was said, I was like,
No.
really?
Yeah. But, and for those of you who don't know, who Tu Wong Fu is, Wong Fu. It's Tu Wong Fu.
The title for the film is derived from the fact that there is a photo hanging on the wall behind the group of ladies, and it is of Julie Newmar, very statuesque, standing there, looking very commanding in her presence. And it says, written in her handwriting, supposedly, to Wong Fu. To, as in...
for you.
Given to Wong Fu. Thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. And I think people just say it as it's just the name
Tu
Tu
Wong
Wong
Fu.
Fu.
But no, so Wong Fu was actually either the owner or the head chef of the China Kitchen.
Oh, that makes sense.
I think it's what they call Chinese Kitchen. I honestly, my brain is, y'all, I have been sick this week. My brain isn't with me.
I wouldn't have known that even if I was well.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's called research and I didn't write it down.
I did research. I still don't have the name of that.
So I believe the restaurant closed in 93, but they actually often called him Fooey. So this was actually a real gentleman, and and he had all these pictures of famous people in his restaurant, and they would sign their photos for him, and they were all the people who would come in, and the famous people who came in and signed.
Okay.
And yeah, so so I don't know if that was a genuine knockoff of it, because obviously they're not going to take the real picture off the wall. That would be really cool. I mean, not cool, but
I think it's a theme that kind of runs throughout the film, because even in the small town out in the middle of nowhere, you have a lady who we have a thing now for Alice Drummond.
she's now going to be the patron saint of our podcast, because we have now watched 2 movies with her in it, not realizing she was in it, and now we will never not see her in these movies. And that woman has been in a lot of films.
A lot of films, very few TV shows, but a lot of films. So Alice Drummond, who is her actual name, the actor, her character has a whole lot of film memorabilia, film photos of actors and actresses and musicals and stuff like that. So she has a lot of things in her home which speak to a life she had before, in which maybe she was in the industry. So that's why it's weird that it correlates to their beginnings.
Yes.
Photos on the wall. You go to her house in this small town, photos on the wall.
Yes. So Wesley Snipes' character, Noxima, wants to go to Hollywood, become a famous actress, and she wants to redo the movies of Dorothy Dandridge, who is her favorite actress. But she did say that Pearl Bailey should also have a national holiday. But she said that, she's going through the different movies and she's talking with Alice Drummond's character, who at that time doesn't speak to anybody. They said that she hadn't spoken since her husband died.
And doesn't hear you. So they think that she doesn't hear them and doesn't speak.
Yeah, she's just ignoring them. And she probably feels that nobody has anything to say that she wants to hear. Until Noxima starts talking her language, which is obviously old movies.
And this is a part in the film after they have obviously landed in Snydersville and they're having their car fixed. The 3 drag queens kind of start pairing off into their own groups of townspeople. Alice Drummond drops a picture from her photo album and Noxima runs over and grabs it and chases her with it.
Miss Clara, that's her name.
Miss Clara, that's right. So she's paired off right now with Miss Clara. Then it goes to Vita, who is becoming friends, or at least introduced to Stocker Channing and her little family.
Yes, and her oldest daughter, Bobby Lee.
Bobby Lee. Then you have Chi Chi, who is aimed right at
Bobby Ray.
Bobby Ray. So you have they're starting to infiltrate the town. And I'm saying infiltrate in that they're kind of weaving themselves into the fabric of the town itself, because you see people starting to change.
Yes.
This is that thing of bringing color into a black and white film, where you start seeing things that are dull and stuff like that, and they're all the same. And then
it's the Pleasantville phenomenon.
It really is. It is in a less blatant way than Pleasantville. It is very much whereas Pleasantville's more showing color to show reality.
Yes. But it was that same kind of, though, injecting color,
right,
and bringing life into places slowly through.
So these people have kind of found themselves in the day-to-day, not just humdrum. I'm talking about day-to-day ennui is the best way I can say it. There's an ennui in the town. No one fancies anything other than just getting through the next few moments, and that is where everybody finds themselves when the trio shows up. And because they've paired off, they're starting to vibe the place up. They're starting to make changes happen just by being there.
I'm not going to lie, though. When they woke up the next morning and the car was out there and there was everybody in the town standing around their car, I would have been like, okay, we're walking out of this fucking place.
Like,
I'm gone.
We're going to die.
We're going to die.
That's what I would have thought. I definitely would not have headed towards them.
No, I would have been like, I'm sorry. Something is going on here. I'm out of here.
At that point is when you really get the sense that, okay, they're not going to change. When I first saw this film, I thought they were going to change at some point and not be drag queens. They just continued being drag queens the whole time. They did not change out of their clothes. They came out dressed yet again in...
Yeah,
and that was in performance wear.
Yeah,
that time.
Well, no, they were still in.
No, because she said she did it for the hat. Remember?
Oh, she said we needed a party. I forget what kind of hats they were, but yeah, she was wearing a hat, and the other two kind of rolled their eyes at her when she said tomorrow. It feels like it's some type of hat day, and neither Chi-Chi nor Noxzema are wearing a hat. Those, honestly, at that point, Noxzema's outfit was totally 90s. That outfit there was such a 90s with a t-shirt underneath the spaghetti strap dress and the denim jacket. And then Chi-Chi comes out in her baby doll dress. I mean, that is like, I wore those clothes.
And everyone in the town is 80s to Depression era.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So the only one who was really, I think, out of the three drag queens, because she had more business formal pantsuits and button-down blazers, was really Vita. She had that more formal, more mature woman style.
Well, it really harkened to the previously privileged white man who had the funds at one time to afford these types of clothes. And that's something else I noticed in the film, is that they completely abscond from the idea that drag queens make their own stuff.
That's true. Now, not all drag queens make their own stuff, but if you have spent any time watching any season of RuPaul's Drag Race, you know that is a plus. And a lot of drag queens do know how to make their own stuff.
Especially if you're poor.
Yeah, because that's, if you don't have the funding to go and hire somebody to tailor all your clothes for you, I think that's why Ru always has that on the show as part of, there's always a sewing challenge, because I feel like that's bringing it back to the roots of drag, is making your own stuff.
So Vita, I think, is in a lot of ways emulating the trauma from her mother, because a lot of her clothes seem to be styled.
Yes, that one little scene that we saw of her mom in her little blazer and skirt, that was very much the style. Maybe she's a little bit more stylized, but she definitely has that same rich look about her.
And this is why I get the sense that, because when they're sniping it, when they're Wesley sniping at each other, and they're saying some fairly racist things to each other.
Yes.
Although I have to say Patrick Swayze's character is probably the worst committer of that, because a white man saying it to marginalized people, not a good optic. We could say it was the 90s. But in the 90s, I wouldn't have said those things to someone.
Nope.
So that was purposeful. It was meant to hurt. And that's what they were doing it for, because people react that way. And that was one of probably the more realistic depictions. But it made me believe that Patrick's character, Vita, is more trans than drag queen.
I wouldn't argue with you that way. I really wouldn't. There's a lot about Vita that definitely, for me, leans towards trans, definitely.
You notice neither of the ones, when they got pulled over by the sheriff, the only person who was worried was the white trans woman.
Yes, the other two were not even fazed.
They weren't fazed by it, not because they weren't going to be asked for their IDs, but because they're drag queens. Showing your ID isn't the issue.
Nope.
Sure, it can be dangerous, but that can be dangerous anywhere. Why, for the specific fear for Vita to show hers? And why did she feel she needed to tell someone, especially a friend of hers, Noxzema, who she has helped build up through her career, didn't know her first name? they've never come out of their drag
See, that's
persona.
that's the thing. There's so many things that, again, so many things about this movie to love, but so many things about this movie that you have to go, but that doesn't make sense in reality. And again,
Unless she's a trans woman and doesn't have the real words for that. Transsexual may have been too strong because not every transgender person wants to rearrange their genitals. Not every trans woman or trans person has gender dysphoria. So if you don't have those,
and I
and
don't
you're
think
being,
Vita has a problem with who she is physically, what her body is. I don't think she has that problem.
I think she does to a point when she's putting on her stuff,
Oh, that is true. She wasn't happy until she had her makeup and her
right?
wig on.
And she looked down when she was putting on the bustier. She definitely had the look of someone who was not happy
Yeah.
with who they were, whereas the other two did not have that. So I have to say that, and I'm certainly not diagnosing this character, but you're led to these places through the script. And I
Yeah.
can only say that Vita is perhaps a trans woman who hasn't quite found out who they are yet, because they're still reacting to trauma they've had throughout their lives. And one of those is just being a gay man, obviously, in her family. And once you come out like that, it is much harder to say, well, I'm actually not a gay man, I'm a woman. That's a much harder step because coming out as a gay man is already stigmatizing.
Yes.
And then you're showing them any version of confusion that is created by a cis-normative society. It's not your issue, it's society's issue, and you were brought up in that society to have that confusion.
Well, one of the things I found interesting also with that in mind is after they beat the crap out of Virgil for hitting Stalker Channing, they're drinking and she says, wish all men would disappear, paraphrasing here. And they were like, not all men, because not all men. So, I mean, that was an opportunity where Vita could have been like, yeah.
And I think that also showed kind of that knee-jerk reaction. That even if you're masking, because I've said this phrase, and it hurts me to this day to think I've said this phrase to our son. When he was expressing his frustration with society in general, and I would say, not all men, but I was masking then. And I had the privilege of a male presenting person. I was presenting as a man. I didn't see the tree. I didn't see the forest through all the trees. That's my issue. And yes, it is sad that you only really come to these conclusions once they start affecting you. But that's the way anybody comes to conclusions.
Oh, yeah. It's how you learn.
Right. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it sucks. But I think that unless you exist in it, it's very hard to know the shoes of another person.
Yes.
When they're reacting to Stalker Channing saying no more men, I just want to be rid of all of them, she's expressing a frustration that she has felt over being abused by this one man who has caused enough pain and trauma to affect it at this time for all men for her. And she may come to a conclusion later on, but for right now, it's all men. It is all men. And their knee-jerk reaction was spot on for a drag queen.
Oh, yeah.
Not all men.
Yes.
Because they're not in that situation. They aren't
That's
women.
true.
They are playing women on a stage.
And even then, they're really not.
Right. But as the characters, it's spot on for the characters to be, defensive.
Yeah.
About their...
Because again, the hate towards people who do drag or are different, are gay, are trans, each one has their own brand of hate towards them. Because you can be a complete, you can be the gentlest human being on earth and treat women with kid gloves and hate a drag queen. So there's not always going to be the same. There's going to be an overarching, arching, whatever, I always say that wrong, an overarching brand of hate. But I think that each group has hate that the other group may not ever fully understand. I will never understand the hatred of somebody of a different color. I can never understand that. But I can understand the way people treat somebody who is transgender, especially transgender women, because I share some of the hatred. Not all of it, because I'll never fully understand that hatred either.
Well, and you live with someone who endures it.
Yeah, so that's the only reason really why I can fully grasp the hatred that is spewed. And while other people of color or transgender are gay, and they will see the hatred that is spewed at women, and while they may understand it, they may not fully grasp the minutia of the hatred. And that's just the way it is. So yeah, they wouldn't, in that scene, you're right, it would make sense that they would just react and not fully see the other person's point of view, because I can never fully live somebody else's experiences.
That's what communication is for.
Mm-hmm.
If we learned to communicate more openly and actually had a dialogue with the people that we hated for the reasons that we can't fathom why we hate them, I think we would come to a conclusion that would not be still centered in hate.
Oh, totally.
We have issues with people we know who hate groups of one or another.
Yes.
And it's hard for people you love
to be so closed-minded, especially when those are the people who taught you to care and taught you to be a better person. And then they're the ones who are not.
It's part of being human. I think when I'm going to pull off a little, which for me is funny, a religious analogy here for, not really an analogy, but an example. The Tower of Babel, I don't think it was about communication. It's about lack of communication.
Okay.
So I think that when we're talking about the differences we have and we're not listening, that's lack of communication. Even if you're talking, even if you're all talking, if you're not listening to each other, you're not having communication. You have to be willing to put yourself literally in their shoes. It is very hard. It is very difficult. It is a learned skill. It is not something you can just do. You have to learn how to listen.
I mean, literally, I teach special education, and it's one of the first things that we are taught is one of the most important skills for anybody is communication. And we have to teach communication to some of our students because they don't have a voice or they don't have an ability to tell us what their needs and wants are. And so, yeah, it's such a basic need is to communicate. And that really, that makes sense. If we just communicated, people may be willing, instead of talking at people, talking with people. Because sometimes when you get groups together to talk, because you're going to have these moments where people are going to discuss and we're going to just be honest and tell our sides, they end up talking at each other and not with each other. And I think those conversations should not be held in a forum, but sometimes that's what they do because they want it to be publicized. They want it to be, a big thing that we're going to do this. But I think it needs to be held on a more intimate level. Even though we're trying to change a ton of minds at one time, it really on an intimate level would be better because that's when you're going to have the give and take. And less likely the defenses aren't going to be up because you're not going to be surrounded by your people who are going to be like, I
think like in the trans community, I think a lot of us have like a saying we kind of co-adopt for different things. But if you have a trans friend, you won't be against trans people. Because once you know a trans person and you understand what that actually is, who we actually are, doesn't mean you have to like that person, but you'll know that the thing that you're afraid of is the moral panic and not actually anything real. It's a manufactured panic. And so if you have a trans friend, you have a gay friend, you have a black friend, you have a Hispanic friend, talking about all these connotations in the movie.
I think that if you have a friend who is trans or black or Hispanic, because like you said, to talk about the characters in the movie, and you look at policies that are being created and laws that are being passed and stuff, and you're okay with that, then you do not have a friend who is trans or black or Hispanic. You know people, but you don't care about them because you can't call somebody your friend if you don't care about them.
You can't call them family. You can't call them friends.
If you're willingly going against them.
And this is what I get from a movie in which IMDb says 3 drag queens travel across country until their car breaks down, leaving them stranded in a small town.
I was going to say, Wong Fu took a really dark turn for a second here.
I don't think it's a dark turn.
Not a dark turn. Just
I think it's less comedy.
I think there is.
And I don't think there's much comedy in this.
No, it had moments of, but there was not.
I think to call it a comedy film is to look at it strictly as a white cishet person who has never had any adversity. And it's not a comedy film.
No. And I think also calling it a comedy is seeing 3 known actors dressing as women and having the whole Milton Berle effect of, well, this is funny. Ha ha, they're women, they're men in women's clothes. Ha ha, this movie's going to be hysterical. But there's actually deeper messages in this thinly veiled, because it is definitely thin. And there are messages, and even if the movie itself isn't actually addressing those messages intentionally, they're there.
Let me run through it real quick, and let's see if this still sets as a comedy for anyone. 3 women travel across country. Their car, as they're getting out of the city, a sheriff stops them, and he pulls one of them out and then sexually assaults her. She knocks him out thinking that she's killed him. They panic and they drive away. They come to a small town where the car is broken down. A group of men try to rape one of them. They befriend a woman who's being beaten by her husband. They exact not vengeance, but justice by helping her. I'm talking about true justice, not like legal.
One of the women stood up for her and
Right.
knocked him down.
Right. We're talking about justice for her, not for society. So he gets kicked out. The town rallies around these 3 women to protect them from that cop who initially sexually assaulted her. This doesn't sound like a comedy.
No, it sounds like a really twisted Hallmark film, but not a comedy.
It doesn't sound like a comedy because you took out drag queen.
Yep.
That's the only thing you have to change.
Because even a drama can have some lines that are kind of chuckle-worthy.
Right. But I don't think that taking drag queen out is necessary to understand that this is not a comedy.
No, I agree. It's not a comedy with or without the drag queens.
That it is considered a comedy because they are acting as drag queens in this film.
And literally only one of the actors is known as a comedian.
But because it's that, because there's the 3 main actors are called drag queens, this is a comedy. This is something that society shows us.
Yep.
That this is funny because of work that they do.
Yes.
That we see as subversive or alternative.
Do you think if Wong Fu came out now, so let's just say we did it with modern actors. So this is a 2000, we'll say 26. We'll give it a couple years for them to do in production.
Ooh, in the future.
In the future. And let's see, we do Chris Evans as Vita. And who should we have for Noxzema? I keep wanting to say Idris Elba, but I think he's too big of a guy.
I don't know. Wesley Snipes is very big.
Okay, so we'll do
very stacked
because he's just really handsome. So we'll throw Idra in there because I think he is. Okay, so who could be your twink? Tom Holland, but I wanted to go with Hispanic to fit with the flavor of the movie. Sorry, this is sad. This is what it says about modern Hollywood that I can't think of a Hispanic man who is skinny.
I mean, I keep going to Pedro.
See, I couldn't put Pedro in there either.
But yeah, that wouldn't.
And I keep wanting to
Although
say,
he would make a great Vita.
He would make a great Vita. Ooh, I might change Chris Evans up for Pedro. Think that would work?
I think you could do that.
Okay, I'm sorry, Chris. Love you, but no, it's got to be Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
So we just did a twofer right there. So then we can keep Tom Holland for the twink.
There you go.
Okay, so Tom Holland, Idra Elvis, and Pedro Pascal, dressed in drag. Would it hold up today? Same
script.
Same script.
And they're always in drag.
And they're always in drag.
No, it would not hold up. There's a reason for that. It's not the characters. It's not the actors. It is the writing.
It is the writing.
Now, I don't know who did the writing. I'm sure I could look it up, but we're not doing a review, so I did not look that up.
I did not either.
I just thought it was interesting that their director is a baroness, which I
And
did not expect.
She had her baby during the movie. So in the credits is Best Baby is Noah Kidron.
Adorable.
Yeah.
So here's my thing. This is a small, trite movie.
Mm-hmm.
If you take it at just the very surface value of the film.
Yeah.
If you only look at the surface, this is a trite movie about 3 drag queens. It is the IMDb bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it any deeper, I've been on the edge of tears this whole time.
Yeah.
If you look at it any deeper and you are not a straight white cishet person,
mm-hmm.
you will find pieces of this that pull at you. Pieces of this that will pull at the fibers of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It will either outrage you or it will endear it to you. But either way, you'll have feelings about this film because there's no way not to. Even as a white cishet person, which are represented in the film as the townsfolk,
yes,
you should be able to dredge up some feeling for the things that are happening in this film. Mm-hmm. Because you can be a white cishet woman and understand exactly what it's like to be predated upon. To have these men not just leering at you, but physically empowered.
I mean, honestly, how cute was Stalker Channing's little girl, Bobby Lee?
Oh, no, adorable.
And I'm sorry, those guys didn't go after her, but they went after Chi-Chi?
Yeah, but it is about power and not about...
Maybe they were afraid of Virgil.
I
don't think he cared about his kids, though.
I think it's more about repercussions. They felt there'd be less repercussions going after a Hispanic woman who's new to town.
True.
Rather than someone they know from school.
So how many people have passed through that town that they have actually raped?
Yeah.
You know, there's it's one thing about movies is I tend to think about what happened before and what happened after. I try not to, but that's something. But so what I would like to do is I would love to talk to some of the actual drag queens that were in this movie. And I'm talking about Coco Peru. Coco Peru, who I'm not going to lie, y'all, my interaction and my knowledge of Coco Peru is when she did, I can't remember if she did Vines or YouTube videos, and maybe she still does do YouTube videos, but she talked about the Tension Tama tea. And she went on this mission through Los Angeles to find the Celestial Seasons Tension Tamer tea. And I can't say Tension Tamer tea. I know I just said it, but most of the time you can ask Beth. When I'm talking about it, I'll say, oh, you mean the Tension Tamer tea? And that's because of Coco Peru. Head of lettuce.
You're really hitting into that Marissa Tomei.
It's my
foot stomping.
It is my it is my heritage. Head of lettuce. Candace Kane. But Lady Bunny was in this. Lady Bunny is literally in a scene that you pass by. If you blink, you miss it. But Lady Bunny and Mama Rue. And I would love, first thing I would just love to sit in a room and talk with Rue, just in general, about literally nothing at all. Just talk to RuPaul. But I would really like to know their opinions of this movie now. I mean, in 95, it was probably like, yes, we're going to do a movie. But when RuPaul had that, and there's your example. Perfect right there. That TV show that RuPaul had one season of on Netflix with the kid.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
None of them traveled in drag.
Right.
They don't travel in drag. It's not who, it's what
a
they
stage
do.
performance.
It's not who they are. So, I would sit with RuPaul and I would be like, looking back at 95, when you did that movie, how would you feel? How do you feel about it now? Have you done a recent watch? I mean, what's the likelihood of that? But, if you did a recent or did a rewatch, what would you feel about that movie and the messages that it tells and shows? Yes, it is good that it's out there and it's saying to young potential drag queens that, don't give up, you can do this. But it really isn't giving them any type of realism
Well,
of the drag world.
it just used drag queen as a mechanism.
It really did. Because again, there's a pageant and there's two pageants, but there's nothing of what the pageant world is actually like in drag. And not all queens are pageant queens. So you've got 3 queens. The likelihood of all 3 of those queens being pageant queens, I mean, yes, they met at a pageant, but there are so many different types of drag queens and drag kings out there that I just feel like it didn't really address everything. But again,
I think this film was unintentionally very moving, not for the reasons they expected.
Exactly.
And it definitely wasn't a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel it was a comedy. I can't find the comedy in this.
It was a lighthearted film, but I would not call it comedy. And
think
it was lighthearted in the sense that it had some chuckles.
Yeah, I think there were moments of lightheartedness.
Nobody kissed.
And a drama.
Nobody kissed. Nobody, I mean, they held hands, but there was no romance in it. There was likes, like, in Stalker Channing says that she loves Vita, but I don't think it's a romantic love. It's definitely a, just, I love you, you're my person.
It's a platonic love.
And I'm going to also negate something else. I have met women, cis women, who have had Adam's apples. So I hate that whole thing that men only have Adam's apples.
There are plenty of cis women with prominent Adam's apples.
Yeah, so I really hate that.
We have the same biology.
Yeah, that's not bones might be a little bit wider because we got to pass a baby through them. And that's pretty much the biggest difference. That's how most of the time they can, and even then they can't always tell because narrow hips exist in women and wide hips exist in men. So again, that is just another cliche of
the times. It's a cliche of the times, and it still kind of is upheld. But that's part of that sexism and everything else. And the belief that there are fewer ribs, and there's a whole lot of misinformation that people just wholeheartedly believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when you look at this film as a whole, it's hard to see the comedy, but it's very easy to see why someone labels it a comedy. If you take away everything but the drag queens, you can go, oh, okay, that's supposed to be the funny part, is that they're drag queens.
Yeah.
But what I see is people who are not part of society that have to exist outside of it. Even the white guy in it has to exist outside of it. He cannot exist with his family. He cannot exist as part of the world he grew up in. He exists in a small apartment in which he dresses up so that he can go out and perform.
Yep.
I think that if you take all of this and you watch this film with open eyes and an open heart, you don't need the comedy, but you can understand it for what it is. An unintentional masterpiece of emotional discourse.
Definitely.
Much like Reefer Madness is an unintentional comedy, this is an unintentional drama.
Yeah. I mean, they touch on everything when it comes to traumas.
And honestly, the most comical part to me is the sheriff at the end, where Sheriff Dollard is calling out the entire town of 4 buildings and a funeral. He's calling out the entire town. And they all protect the drag queens by making fun of the sheriff, which isn't realistic. But again, this is a movie.
But the police officers who found him made fun of him.
Yes.
He's just a joke.
Very sexist reasons.
Yes, that was another form of sexism. When you got hit by a girl, it's like,
Yeah, it can be, there are hard things to watch in this. Not because of drag queens, because I have made my peace with the idea that drag queens are not making fun of me and they're not making fun of cis women.
yes.
It took me a while to get to that. I would love for you to be able to talk to some drag queens, to have them on the show. I know that we are a nothing show right now, and
Maybe someday.
that if maybe we get some on, we can go back over this film again.
Yeah. I have my eye on a few drag queens that I would love to talk to beside RuPaul. Looking at you, Eureka. Looking at you, Alaska. There's a few. Trixie Mattel, Jinx Monsoon.
So, and yeah, they don't have to be in the film, but it would give some insight that we do not have because neither of us are drag queens or have been. So, if you are a drag queen, you don't have to be a famous one.
Just the queen. You're all queens.
But if you're a drag queen
Or a drag princess.
or a drag princess,
Or a drag king.
if your egg is cracked on stage and you're a drag king, queen, princess, or prince, we'd love to go over this again with someone on the show, and we will
Get their point of view. Maybe we're wrong.
we will break down to Wong Fu in an emotional and responsive
We'll bring
way.
tissues.
Yeah, we'll bring the tissues because I am on the verge of tears this whole time because I am emotional. But there are plenty of reasons to be emotional in this film.
No, I agree.
So given all of that, let's see how this movie stacks up against the Castellini test.
Okay.
2 named female characters. At least 2 female characters must be named and have 5 lines of dialogue each.
Well, all the female characters have names. And unfortunately, I can't remember all the character names, but the blonde who likes the store guy,
Right? The store guy, that's right.
she has a lot of lines because she's giving him all the dirt. She's giving them
She gives the drag queens.
all the dirt on the town.
Right.
And
she's
it's
the
funny
gossip.
how she said that one woman was an alcoholic and yet you never see her drink.
That's true.
But so she has a few lines. I would say Alice Drummond's character, because we do see Miss Clara, but she really doesn't say much. But that's because her character doesn't really say much. Stalker Channing's character has a lot of lines. Bobby Lee has a lot of lines. So we do have a lot of women having more than 5 lines. So there's that.
So we have step 1 is affirmative. Conversation. The characters must have a conversation, but it doesn't have to be with the other woman.
Well, Stalker Channing and Patrick Swayze have conversations.
That's true.
Wesley Snipes and Alice Drummond, even though, again, it's mostly one-sided.
We might have to negate that because the woman isn't actually having a conversation. She's just listening.
But
She's
then
just
she
there.
does add stuff into the conversation.
Later on, she says a couple of words. Yes.
Okay. Patrick Swayze and Bobby Lee. And
Okay.
Yeah. Now, granted, they are talking about a boy, but mostly about what you want in this world
But
and not...
that's okay because for this step, it doesn't require
Okay.
what they're talking about. So it passes
I think
step
it
2.
does.
So the third and final is integral to the plot. At least one of the women must be essential to the plot, meaning that the movie would not have the same ending if she were removed.
Okay, so let's say none of the other women. If they were all gone, it wouldn't matter. Stalker Channing's character, I don't think it would change too much, unfortunately. Cause
If you take away
Virgil would
everything
still
about
be
the
a
movie
dick.
but the plot is, unfortunately, 3 drag queens take a trip.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, the movie would still go on.
Right. So despite the fact that this is so heavily geared towards empowering women in the film, it is a result of 3 men who have a profession as drag queens. Is it feminist?
I mean, I think there are feminist designs,
I don't think it
but I don't think
fits
it's a feminist movie.
a representation of women in film, but I think it fails the Castellini test on that one point. But I think as far as feminism being displayed. I think it kind of is.
I think it wanted to be. I don't think it knew how. So just to remind everybody, feminism isn't necessarily about women. Feminism is about equality. So would it mean? It would mean that women and men would have the same amount of airtime. It would be
equity.
An equity.
Yes.
Yeah, the equity of the movie. So again, having Stockard Channing's character as maybe a plot point towards with Vita and her, saving her character from the abusive husband. Yeah, that wouldn't change how the other two characters interacted with the town.
And it doesn't change the outcome.
It doesn't change the outcome. They would still go to LA. They would still meet Julie Newmar, and Chi-Chi would still win.
Are they going to be better people having done this?
I don't think it made them better people either way.
Right.
I think they left Snyderville as the same people as they came.
Yeah, but
maybe,
what I'm
maybe
saying
Chi-Chi.
is, no, I was actually talking about not the drag queens, the townspeople.
I think they probably would. I think because like I said, Chi-Chi and Noxzema would have gone off and still have done their things, and maybe Vita would have found somebody else.
I think the townspeople improved. But I don't think they were part of equity.
No.
I don't think this was a stand for feminism. I think it used feminism as a device.
Yeah.
And I think that is a reflection not of just the times, but perhaps the idea of what feminism is.
Mm-hmm.
Having a woman get one over on her abusive husband isn't feminism.
She didn't stand up to him. I mean, she did at the very end, but all she did was stare at him.
Right. And he walked away.
Yep.
And all I was thinking is, in reality, he'd come at her again because that's how he does.
Yeah, and there's no resolve in that relationship.
Right. She seems like a stronger person, but people often fall back into their ways. And we all have vulnerabilities. I don't think this was a feminist film. I think it was a device that was used as a way to accelerate these three drag queens through the film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing ever, but it's not the best thing ever either.
No. And I don't know if we went and looked at the careers at that time, was it here did it push anybody's career in a positive or a negative way? I
don't know
it
that
was.
It did anything for anybody.
I know.
I don't think I don't think this film put anyone in a position of greater celebrity or anything else. I'm not saying it's not a bad film.
No, it's not a bad film.
But you have to take it for what it is. It is an emotional journey. It's not a literal journey. The literal journey is done through vignettes.
Mm-hmm.
The real work is the emotional digging you have to do in this film. So you have to dig through a lot of layers to get to the truth of the film.
Yeah.
Which isn't something they intended, I'm sure.
No.
This is not what the writers intended when they wrote it.
No.
If they did, please tell me, because I don't think that's true.
I think it was a lighthearted romp through whatever to, this journey that they didn't actually see.
They didn't actually journey.
And, yeah, but they never really, did they say, I don't remember where they say Snydersville is, but it's so funny because they're like, we've been driving for so long, we must be in West Virginia. And I'm thinking maybe they're just outside of it or whatever. Maybe they're in Kentucky somewhere.
But even Sheriff Dollard says,
you're far from West Virginia.
From West Virginia.
And Loma is in Nebraska. So I don't remember. It doesn't really say what state they're in. But yeah, so their travel is kind of like meh.
It's the travel is as curvy and winding and unknown as the plot point.
True. The one thing they did get right, though, is you probably could have traveled from coast to coast on $1,000.95.
Oh, I know you could because I did it.
Yeah.
I did it in 92. I traveled from New Hampshire to California.
See, so there you go. It can be done, people. You can watch To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. You can actually rent it on YouTube and Google, Apple TV, Fandango, Amazon Prime. It's all about like $3 or $4.
It's very hard to find it for free anywhere. We looked. It is just
Yeah, it's
not
just
something
not
that's
available. You know, but I know that it gets quoted, like especially the fringe. It's got fringe.
Oh, yeah.
That actually gets quoted a lot. So it's funny.
But we want to thank you for following along with us on this journey through To Wong Fu. Thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. It's been a hard road for some of us. Maybe you got something out of this film. Perhaps you could look at it again if you saw it a long time ago.
Which we did.
Yeah, it's the only two times I've watched this film. I've forgotten a lot of it, and I was surprised at the characters that there's so many people in this film.
Oh, yeah.
Just try to be there in the moment with this film. Try not to look at the surface. Try to look under the surface and see the fish.
Yeah, because it can be a little stinky in there. Okay, so thanks for hanging out with us. And if you had a good time, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And hey, why not follow us on Blue Sky and Instagram at OMWFPod for all the updates and the show notes.
Do you have burning questions, movie picks, or you just want to spill your thoughts? Shoot us an email at omwfpod@gmail.com. We can't wait to hear from you. Seriously, we live for this stuff. This is what we live for.
And this has been Once More with Feelings.
I'll tell you one thing, when the Founding Fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and what have you, liberty and justice for all, they didn't mean.
Well, I can tell you one thing about them founding fathers of America.
What's that?
They sure had fabulous wigs.